Hi guys, and welcome to episode 26 of the Your Progress is Our Passion podcast. The first time when I'm interviewing a guest and I actually know what episode number it is, so I sincerely hope I'm right, because I didn't double check before I left the house this morning. I've drove over to Huddersfield this morning to meet with Sarah C over here. Sarah is a fellow mindset coach who I know through the Mindset Coaching Academy, one of the places which I work through. And Sarah, she deals with all sorts of mindset, but specialises particularly in mindset for creative people. We have that in common with each other. We both do a bit of singing, play a bit of guitar. Or do you just sing?
Mostly sing, but I do dabble in guitar, yeah.
So we've got that sort of creative background in common. We met up for the first time in November last year, was it? We're at the Mindset Coaches meetup, and yeah, I just really love their content. Quite polarised to mine in many ways, which is one of the things I'm hoping to get into today. So I've done enough talking. As always, I can go on. I'm going to hand over to Sarah and take it from there. So there's always a reason why we end up in mindset coaching. I'd love to know what yours was.
Cool. So I guess for me, I didn't know that that's what it was to start. So all I knew was that I was really interested in other people. I really wanted to know what made them tick. And I also knew that I was just going through a lot of pain throughout sort of my teenage years in particular, but a lot of kind of stuff going on in childhood, I think that I really wanted to address. So I didn't really think of it as being mindset. I just thought of it as like, I need to fix these problems I have.
Yeah.
So I decided that I'd go on to university to do psychology because I thought, well, that would be a really good way to understand people a bit more.
Yeah.
But I actually started studying it when I was probably about 14, so I did it at GCSE, which is quite a rare option to do, but then went on to college and then to university. So I kind of decided that whilst I was studying it, I wanted to know how to apply it properly. So I started reading a lot more as well, beyond like the academic studies, and then I was really interested in just kind of applying that. So I started with my family and started trying to help them, and then I helped myself really, because actually when I was at university, unfortunately I had really bad anxiety and depression, but I didn't really know that's what it was properly until I started studying it more, and then I decided, right, I need to address this because I realised at some point that that's what was stopping me from achieving what I actually wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
So I guess it really started just kind of, trying to help my family and then trying to help myself, and then one day I was like, oh, this is what mindset is. And then it kind of all kind of came together. So it wasn't like I'm on a mission to learn about mindset, it just came about probably when I was about 22. So once I'd actually left university and then went off into the world and kind of figured it out for myself, really.
Okay.
But yeah, there's so many avenues I could go down with that because it's such a long story, I suppose.
Is there any from kind of your past that you're happy to share, that of what really drew you towards wanting to kind of explore those avenues?
Definitely. So the biggest one for me was when I was about 16, I started experiencing panic attacks, but I didn't actually know they were panic attacks. So I thought there was something physically wrong with me, because the way it manifested for me was I would feel sick, and then I would think I was going to be sick, and then I would panic, and then I would kind of go in this spiral of panic, and then eventually I'd come out of it. And that happened when I was at a gig. And I'd had like a fizzy drink and it made me feel a little bit sick, and then I just spiralled. And then because it was quite a traumatic event, because I didn't really expect it to happen, I wasn't in the comfort of my own home, all these kinds of things, the next day I was really shocked by it that it happened again. And then it happened again, and it happened every single day for months. Wow. I know, it was pretty hard going. So because I wasn't really around people that understood mental health, I didn't actually recognise it as being anything mentally up. I thought I felt sick, and then the panic was, so I didn't really identify as being a panic attack. So I went to the doctors, and they said to me that I probably had some gastrointestinal issues. So they were treating that rather than the kind of the mental health aspect of it. So I started taking some like weirdly antihistamines they prescribed me, which in hindsight makes no sense. And it worked because it was a placebo. So I thought if I take this pill, it's going to make me not panic. And it did, until it didn't. Because then it happened again and I was like, oh, damn, that was a placebo. And then that was when I realised, hang on, this is in my head. Because even though, you know, they didn't work, it did work for a little while. So something had changed and it wasn't the tablet, it was me. So then I started digging a little bit more, and I actually really incidentally met a psychiatrist. It was one of those really weird, you know, had to meet them at that moment. And I was talking to him about what was going on with me, and he was like, what you're describing there is called panic disorder. And then he explained the whole cycle. So what happens is that you have something in your environment that triggers your anxiety, and then you have a thought that you're ultimately afraid of. So for me it was throwing up, which is like, to some people doesn't seem like a big deal, but actually is surprisingly quite common. A lot of people have that fear. And then you think about that, and then you kind of go in a loop of thinking about it over and over again, which then exacerbates the symptoms of anxiety, and then you just kind of spiral. So realising that and what was actually happening made me address it and actually then deal with it. And then, because as soon as I was like, I know what's happening now, it was such a relief. And that was the hardest bit, just not knowing what the hell was going on. Every single day I was panicking, but I didn't know what was actually happening. So when I realised that, I kind of was like, I can actually fix this now. And then, so I looked at different sort of techniques around that. So it was breathing techniques, because again, what I realised, the symptoms of it were, you know, hyperventilating, feeling more sick, wanting to run. My kind of instinct was flight rather than fight. I just had this overwhelming kind of urge to run. And then, and I realised that all of that was incompatible with deep breathing. If you actually deep breathe a lot, it's very difficult to feel those symptoms. And again, once I started doing that, I was like, this actually works. Other people need to know about this. Like, because it's so simple, it's easy to overlook. And people, I think, are often told when they're panicking to deep breathe. And if you've ever had anxiety, you're like, shut up, I don't want to hear that. But actually, it really works, really does. And then anytime you have that thought process of like whatever the fear is for you, just kind of be like, even if it did happen, you'd probably be okay. Just try and turn it around rather than like get more and more upset about it. So the reason why that was such a big game changer for me is because not only did I have the anxiety, but it manifested in loads of really weird ways as well. So I wouldn't leave the house because I was afraid that I would have an anxiety attack when I was around people, and the thought of having to deal with that in a social situation was really tough. And then it also manifested into an eating disorder. So because my underlying fear was about throwing up, I was like, well, if I eat, then I'm more likely to throw up.
Right, okay.
So it wasn't really a typical kind of eating disorder in the sense of, it was a control thing, I guess, in a way, because I was like, if I could control my environment as much as possible, then this will go away. So it was massive avoidance behaviour. But so I kind of stopped eating as much because I thought that would be a way to control the anxiety. And then that just went into its own kind of problem and developed in a different way. And then I got depression because I was not socialising because I didn't want to see people, and I developed a bit of a fear of leaving my own house. So it kind of all started there and then just went mental. So like I say, having that conversation with someone who actually explained to me, this is what is happening, I could start to kind of pick it all apart and then realise where it was all coming from. And then when that happened, it just changed my life. Like it was, and then I was like, I need to help other people with this because I can't be the only one. Sure enough, I wasn't. Because I think the danger with having any mental health problems that you feel like you're the only person in the world that has it. Right? And then when I knew how to, you know, when I got tactics and coping like strategies around that, and they really worked, I was like, I need to help other people with this. This is really, really important, because I think the more I was reading about statistics, the more common it actually was. And it's really simple, I think. I know that sounds quite disrespectful, but I think once you kind of know what it is, and once you know what works for you, it's quite easy to overcome it.
Yeah. Actually,
but we overcomplicate it and we think it's like going to last forever, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I can say that because I've been there. I've been in the really dark place, and I want to help other people realise it's not as hard as they think it's going to be going on that journey.
Yeah. You've just dropped like literally 4 golden nuggets in one. I think at least 4. I might listen to this back and come up with more, and I'll hopefully recap on these. One that you've just said, to rephrase what you've just said, it's simple but it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's like dieting and losing weight and building muscle. They're all simple but they're not easy.
Yes.
Like the idea of how to lose weight is simple, but the practice of it is not particularly easy.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and the same with mental health. It's like a lot of the strategies that we use, they are very simple once you know about them, which that brings you back to the beginning part of when you said once you were aware of it, once that person highlighted what was there. Awareness, when we're dealing with a lot of things, awareness is the starting point to many different things. 100%. As soon as you're aware, you get the ability to kind of intercede, and then the other 2 things, hopefully I remember them both. One was that you started to isolate yourself, and what people are like, oh, I'm isolating myself because I'm isolating myself, and it's like, well, actually there might be an underlying cause somewhere down there. But I talked about this on I'm going to say episode 21, which is technically only a week ago now, but by the time this comes out it'll be 6 weeks ago. And it was about like shame spirals and about how your comfort zone can shrink over time. Yeah. And it's like, oh, I'll take myself away from that, and then but what that ends up doing is causing something else. And for you to take yourself out of a situation to be anxious, you started isolating yourself. Yeah. And isolating yourself then led to depression. Yeah. It's like there's that element of control that you were talking about, but at the same time, is it controlling in the right direction?
Absolutely, and I think that's something that I really want people to kind of realise as well, is that avoidance feels like the solution. It really does, because it's so easy to rationalise, and like you said in your video. That was awesome, by the way.
Thanks.
About like when you were talking about depression, like you absolutely hit the nail on the head. I was like, that's exactly how I would describe it, where you feel like if you avoid social situations, or if you avoid, eating, or if you whatever it is, the form of avoidance feels good. Yeah. And I don't want people to deny that reality, because it's true. It's like there's no point in telling people it's bad, because it feels good, but the reality is it's very short term in the now, immediately feels good. Yeah. But you've got to look at the long game, like what's it going to do in the future. Also, another thing that I didn't mention that I think is worth mentioning is when you are experiencing anxiety and stuff, it's really easy to develop like strange rituals that you think are going to help. Mm. So like for me, I had this really it's so irrational, it's crazy thinking about it now, but I thought that drinking green tea would solve things. So if I didn't have green tea in my house, it was like that made me panic.
Oh yeah.
Which like I was like, if I have green tea, I'll be fine. Yeah. Like that's how I managed to kind of solve it before I knew all this stuff. Was like, I need green tea, and then just knowing that made me feel calm, it relaxed me. But the problem is, I was 1, avoiding situations, and 2, dependent on things in my environment to fix it. Yeah. When actually it was all with me, not green tea, because what if the shop didn't have any? What was I going to do then?
Yeah, I'm a big one for increasing your choices of what could help. There are things that help, and there are things that... But the idea of depending on any one source, for me, it became... We're talking like 8 years ago, maybe 8.5, when I came out of my what I call the big bout of depression, which was the darkest period, like 8 years ago. I became dependent on meditation, and I'd literally go around to, like, my friends that got it and understood it. When I went around to their house, I'd be like, I just need to go off to your room or to the bathroom or something for 15 minutes, and I'm just going to go and meditate because I just need to. And humour mates were cool with that. They were they thought it was a little bit odd and a little bit interesting, but they could also see that I was in a lot better a place than I was 6 months ago. But then there was the odd day where I couldn't.
Yeah.
And I didn't fit it in, and not only did I feel more anxious as a result of not fitting in, but then I also felt like a failure for not doing the thing that helped. And now I have a long list of things that I could do, and it's there's nothing I have to do.
Yes, that's the difference.
It's nice to do, and each one of those things on that list will help move me forward or help move me to a better place. And if I can't have the green tea or chamomile tea, I love chai tea at the minute. But if I can't have that, or if I can't meditate, or if my favourite candle runs out, or my playlist of Zen yoga music or whatever it is not available on Spotify that day, or whatever it may be, what else can I do? And it's having those other options, and it's having options rather than a crutch, rather than a dependency.
Absolutely, and that's
because a lot of people with depression, exercise is brilliant for helping with depression, but a dependency on exercise, and I'm so depressed because I didn't get to the gym today, or I've injured myself, therefore my exercise is taken away from me. And then it's, what else can you do? You need to have a multifaceted life, in terms of your strategies need to have multiple facets. I'll go with that. Probably terrible English. So what made you go into the realms of creativity?
Okay, this is a really cool question. Big question, but cool question. So, again, didn't really know that that's how it was all going to materialise, but I've always been incredibly creative, I just didn't know it. And I think this is a problem for a lot of people. I don't think I'm alone with this one. So even as a kid, I would spend hours drawing, doing my art homework, and so much so that my mum would call me a perfectionist and was like, you need to do your other homeworks. Stop spending so long on your art. But I didn't really think of it as this is the thing I'm going to do or anything. And then I was always really interested in creative writing, and I would go home and I'd write stories about, I remember writing a story about 3 little pigs and then my own version of it, and doing things like that. Just for fun, not for homework. And it was always kind of there, but it was never really brought to light, or no one was you're really creative. No one said it, and I didn't identify with it. And then when I kind of hit my teenage years, that's when all this anxiety and depression and stuff came out. And looking back, I think a lot of it was a bit of suppression around my creativity. So anytime I did try to do something creative, it got shot down, and I got people telling me that, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. And being the sort of person that I was back then, I listened and I took it on. I was very easily suggestible and quite easily manipulated. So I didn't think I was good enough to do those things. So I started singing, and people were like, oh, it's really good. But then there was one person that was like, well, you can't do it because of this, or you can't do it because there's no career in it, that kind of stuff. And looking back, it really didn't matter whether there was a career in it or not. It was just doing it for the love of doing it. But I think that point itself is something I'd like to talk about later, the career versus just doing it for the love of doing it.
Okay. I will try to remember to bring you back to that.
Because I think it stops people a lot. When they think they can't work in it, then they don't do it. Yes. And that's a big problem. But anyway, so a lot of the time I just felt like it was suppressed, and I think that what actually was happening for me was that I didn't have a creative outlet. And there was all this energy I had that I wanted to go somewhere, and it wasn't going anywhere. So it just kind of internalized back in, went into a depression. And then I met somebody when I was 18, a partner, and he was a drummer, and he was definitely going to make it, one of those. But his outlook on it at the time was very much the outcome. It was I want to be a massively famous blah, blah, blah drummer.
Yes.
So I kind of thought that's what it had to be. And I was like, well, if you don't make it, whatever that means, then you may as well not do it. And then I was increasingly becoming aware that I didn't have the thing that he had, and I was very jealous of him. So needless to say, quite a toxic relationship. But so he was kind of expressing his creativity, and I was like, I don't have that. But I didn't realise that that's what it was. So I was feeling really depressed and bad about myself, because I didn't have the thing that he had, but I didn't know that that's the thing was missing for me. I just knew something was missing, and he was highlighting that. So, and I felt like very jealous of him. And then one day I was kind of like, hang on a second. It's because he has something that he loves to death, and I don't.
Yeah.
And once I had that realization, I was like, I need to find my own thing. I need to do something that it doesn't have to be paid for it. I just have to do something that I enjoy. So then I started looking at my childhood. I was like, well, what did I like doing? What was I interested in then before all the kind of limitations were put on me? And I was like, well, I really liked music. It was the only thing I actually did well in school. I really liked art. I really liked writing. I really liked this. And then I got really overwhelmed with it. I was like, oh my God, I like so many things. This is great. It was exciting, but then it turned into overwhelm. And then I did none of it because I was like, there's just too many things. I can't possibly choose any. What if I choose the wrong thing? Blah, blah, blah. And I suppressed it once again. Mm-hmm. And then it came about sort of a couple of years ago, really. So not even that long, when I kind of realised what I'd done again, and I was like, I managed to come through it. So I realised that, right, it doesn't matter if you like lots of different things. Just do them. Mm. Don't worry about any outcome. Just do it for the love of doing it. And when I made that commitment to myself and I really stuck with it, then I kind of realised that you didn't need to have the definite answer straight away. All you had to do was just be curious. Mm-hmm. And curiosity, I think, is the key. Like, okay, I quite like writing. Let's just try that out. Let's just do a little bit of this. Don't put any pressure on it, because if you're sort of an entrepreneurial type, I think it's really tempting to kind of go from being interested in writing to thinking you need to be a best-selling author.
Yes.
And that's a big problem as well that I see. And I was no different.
But I do need to be a best-selling author.
But the problem is once you put that massive goal in it, before you've even had any experience in writing or whatever creative endeavour it is, you put so much pressure on it that you freak out and then you don't do it.
Yes.
And that's the thing I really want to help people with, because as soon as I was like, I just want to do it for the sake of doing it, mm-hmm. then the goal comes later. Like, that doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And focus on the process and not the outcome. We talk about it with our fat loss clients all the time, and it's no different with creativity. Because if it's all about the outcome, then the process will be so much harder, because you'll put so much pressure on it. And that's when things like perfectionism kicks in. That's when things like self-doubt kicks in. That's when essentially fear kicks in. Now, fear, I think, is the biggest problem when it comes to creativity. But fear doesn't go away. It's just how you manage it. When people say, be fearless, I'm like, shut up. Like, that's stupid, because the reality is fear is a really useful emotion. It's just how you channel it. And it's like, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah. And
I think when it comes to your creativity, it's always going to be there, but the difference is you do it anyway, because it doesn't matter if you feel a little bit afraid. It's just how you then go. But it's more important to do it than it is to succumb to the fear.
Yeah.
And I think helping people with that is, the thing I really want to kind of get through to people. Because I honestly believe that a large reason why people feel anxious or depressed is because they don't have a creative outlet. I think that's a really big thing. And obviously we've not got all the time in the world to explain exactly how I came to that realisation. But and the reason why people don't express themselves creatively is because they've either had emotional scars from being a kid, or they just don't think they're good enough. They don't think that there's so many reasons. Some people think they're too overweight to do it, which is really bizarre. I've heard people say. Some people think that they're too old, they think they're too young, they think they're too this, they think they're too that. And it's all these kind of fears, and it's kind of like going, but none of that matters. Just do it because you need to do it, and that's it.
Yes.
It's simple. but
totally
again, not easy.
Have you ever come across the minimalists?
I love the minimalists.
After they released the second book, Everything That Remains, I went to a book signing of theirs and listened to them talk. And I can always remember the guy with the dark hair is Ryan Nicodemus, I think, because that's got an epic name.
Yeah, it is a great name.
And I can't remember the other guy's name.
Joshua Milburn. Joshua Fields.
Yeah. He's got it on as his Twitter thing is just his initials, and that's how I remember it. And he described himself as a skinny Christopher Walken. And I'm like,
it does.
But
it's true.
He was asking, like, they were asking him how because he does the majority of the writing, and Ryan's kind of like puts in the sizzle on top, I guess, like puts in the kind of he's the personality of it, I guess, and. Even in that book, it's like here's the bits that he's written, and like they're in quotes at the bottom of the odd page here and there. So he's the writer, and he writes fiction as well as non-fiction. And he said one of the best pieces of advice he ever got from a mentor was just sit in the chair. Yeah. And like sit in the chair and do the work. Yeah. And I had that written on my notice board for quite some time because whenever I sit in the chair, the work gets done. Now sometimes the work's absolutely rubbish. However, the rubbish work. It's like you can't what if I suck? Okay, I'm going to go and set up. Actually, I can play the drums already. I'm going to go and grab a saxophone. Let's go with that. A saxophone, you can't even get a note out of that instrument just by blowing it because you need to know how to blow right. So unlike with the piano, you press a key and a note comes out. On a saxophone, I'll pick it up and nothing will happen. I'll probably make this horrible noise. But by not making that horrible noise, it's never going to get better.
Exactly.
And it's this idea that Philia?
Have you coined a new term?
Yes. Potentially. I do this all the time. The idea that failure is the opposite of success and not part of it.
Yes.
And people say about like using your creativity and things like, I say I used to write music. But then when I wrote the You Are Enough video and I couldn't find the right piece of music for it. There's this one by a band called Explosions in the Sky that I wanted to use, but obviously copyright issues, and I sent them emails asking, didn't get a response, and I was just like, I need a piece of music, so I made one, and like the You Are Enough music I did that, all of it, and it was like, there you go.
Cool.
What I did, and the idea of I stopped writing music a long time ago, it's not wasted at all. I was like, I found myself in this position where I was like, I need a piece of music. Oh, I can make one. And
it was that simple.
Yeah, it was, and I'm so glad that all of those wasted years trying to be. There was air quotes in there for anyone that's on the listening, not watching. For all those wasted years being a musician and not really getting particularly anywhere. But off the back of that, I've played at something like 10, 15 of my friends' weddings and things like that. It's like, so I always say, I've made it. I made it as a musician. I didn't get any commercial success as a musician. I didn't get anywhere particularly with that. But for the fact that, like, one of my friends to turn around and say, can you play me down the aisle? It's like,
oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. That is made it in my eyes.
Exactly, and it's how you reframe that. Like, I'm all for big goals and ambitions, but if that's the thing that's stopping you from doing the creativity because you feel like you have to make it, as in be like a, A-list celebrity or whatever your definition of making it is, and that's the thing that stops you because it feels so huge, it's like you're looking at the top of the mountain and not the first step. Yeah. Then that's the problem for me. It's not the goal in and of itself of trying to be massive or whatever, although that's not my definition of success. But if that is yours, that's fine. If it's not stopping you from doing the thing you need to do to just be better. Like, the best piece of advice I ever had, and it's very similar to Joshua Fields Milburn, who was actually the same personality as me, I found out the other day. So the advice was, don't get it right, get it written. Yeah. And that stuck with me. Like, I remember hearing that and I was like, that will never leave me. And every time I kind of feel like, if this isn't very good writing, it doesn't matter because the point of it is to try and develop a habit. And I think the way to really think about it as well, if you're, say, a personal trainer or a coach or something, you're not always going to have great training sessions, but would you say you shouldn't do it in case it's not going to be a perfect training session? Yeah. No, of course not. And think of your creativity in the same way. It's like some days they're not going to be great sessions, but it's still better to do it than not do it, like, unless you're injured or whatever. But you know what I mean, generally speaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you can get into that mindset and just think of it as like building a habit in, just because I think it's just so important for your well-being. Like, we need to express ourselves. Human beings need that capacity to do that, and yet so many people block that off because they're told that they're not creative, they're told that they're not good enough, they're told all these things, and it sucks. And it's not something I think that gets talked about enough. Like, sure, there's loads of stuff on creativity, but I think in the realms of mindset, it's not, I personally haven't seen it be sort of specifically talked about in that arena very often. It's more kind of about addressing the anxiety and depression and the coping mechanisms with that. But why did they happen in the first place? Maybe it's because there was a lot of suppression, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it's kind of then, picking it apart to actually realise why that happened, because all we know is we feel things, but why?
Yeah. I'm going to rephrase something I said. I was speaking to an ex-Ironman triathlete the other day, and they said basically that they've been injured and can't, and now when they go and train, they have to do like really what they now class as crap workouts because they're not the ones they were doing in the build up to the last Ironman. And I said, you're failing twice there, because the workout to yourself, and I don't think they're failing by trying, but by trying, then the workout is, you say it sucks, and then you're actually telling yourself it sucks. You're actually then making yourself not want to go and train later the next time around. So the next better workout you're going to miss out on because you were so disheartened from the previous one. And what I said to them was, in order to do the workouts that you want to do, you need to do the workouts that you have to do. And this is so true of creativity. In order to get the work that you want, you have to do the work that you have to do.
Yes.
And there's going to be, this is the 26th episode of this podcast. 26 episodes ago, and I actually filmed the first one in April last year. It took me 5 months to get them out because of nerves and depression and whatnot. But if I watch the first episode of this podcast, I'm a shocking interviewer. I've got Ben Coomber, who's arguably to this day my at the moment biggest guest on the podcast of so far, and I've got him in front of me, and I'm like, okay, here's my pre-prepared questions. I'm not rolling with anything here. There's no back and forth.
Yeah.
It's like, I've got these 6 questions, whatever it is, we're going with these. And it's just, I just look at that and I'm like, I need to interview him again, basically. And so I'll be like, let's do it. I want to know now. And how I'll be able to do these interviews in another year will be even better still.
But I think it's really good that you did it anyway. Even though, because it's going to be bad. It's the first one you ever did. And it's like, if you can get over that realisation that everyone's bad when they start, because I think a lot of people they want to be amazing immediately. It's that's just not how it works, but that's okay. That is absolutely part of it. And you're going to look back and you're going to go, oh my God, what was I thinking? Of course, everything I look at when I started writing, it's not how I write at all now, because it was never going to be. And I don't even think of it as cringy anymore. I did for a while. But now I'm like, no, that's just a marker of where I was at. And it's kind of almost like a record of like the way I see my writing now is kind of almost like milestones of where I was at in that time.
Yeah.
And it's quite cool to look back and see it rather than go, oh my God, that's terrible. It's just okay, well, it's not as refined as it is now, but I absolutely needed to get all of the kind of the bad stuff out before the good stuff started coming through. It's I think of it as a tap of letting all the sort of sewagey stuff come out before the clear water can run through.
Yeah, but it's never going to just be perfect without doing that.
Yeah, and it will never be perfect ever.
Well,
that's the other thing as well.
Perfection is a myth.
Yeah, because you'll constantly be improving, and therefore it will never be perfect because it's always relative to where you're at. So right now I might be really happy with something, but in a few years' time I'll be like, well, I'm not unhappy with it, but I definitely feel like I've improved since then. I hope so, anyway, because I want to continually improve.
Yeah.
So that's why perfectionism doesn't exist. But I think that expression actually does bug me a little bit because a lot of the time it's not explained what it actually means. People are like, well, what does that mean? It's all good and well saying that, but for me it means it's all relative to where you are. So what you're doing right now might even feel perfect, but it still isn't. Because it's going to change. That's what.
And with creativity, it's every form of creativity is a type of art, and art is actually the value of art eventually is what people perceive it to be.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone reads like one of your pieces and they can take something away from that piece that you didn't even intend to put in there, and that's I find that like truly interesting, because I'd love people to be able to kind of like speak to, I don't know, like an actual the full on constructive Van Gogh's brain or something, and like and say to him, oh yeah, well, you did this with it, and he's like, no, I didn't. That's not what I was intending. But
that's happened to me before. I've written something, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I've written something and someone was like, oh, I loved how you said this. I was like, I didn't mention that at all. That was entirely your interpretation of it, and that's fascinating to me. Like, I wish I could
they've
remember
inferred
what it
something
was.
you didn't imply.
Well, it was like they completely made up a whole thing in it. Like, they were like, oh, I love it. It was like something like, I love it when you talked about, you know, it was to do with relationships, I think. It was like, oh, when you said your partner did this, and I was like, I'd never actually said that. It was just that whatever you read, you interpreted that as me saying this to my partner. I don't know, it was very fascinating, and I was like, wow, like, it really isn't, like, once you've done the work, it's not yours anymore. It's like, it's up to the reader to, like, it's theirs, you know? It's done and it's gone.
So how do you deal with perfectionism now? Because I know when we first met, right, you said that you had the history of perfectionism with the art homework.
Yes.
And now I know you do like to kind of really delve into your work now. How do you personally get the piece of work out there?
Okay, good question. So this was definitely a massive sticking point for me, even, you know, a couple of years back. So not just when I was a kid. And it ultimately came down to this. So I do have high standards for myself, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I want to create good art, and I want to constantly be the best I can be.
Yeah.
But if it's at the expense of putting myself out there, then it's not worth it. So what I mean is, like, I still now sometimes read something I've written and go, it could be better.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't post this, then I'm never going to post it.
Yeah.
And it's better to have it not be to the standard that I want it to be than to not post it at all. And that's what I constantly remind myself of. So, and then I also think, like, once I've posted it, it's just let it go. It's done now. It's out of your hands. It's out of your control. However people respond to it, you can't control. Like, all you can control is doing the work itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you just don't attach too much to the outcome once it's out there, because that was another big problem for me. I'm not going to lie, I loved the validation, I loved the approval, loved it, addicted to it. But then I was like, but I'm now, by attaching so much to those feelings of the likes on Facebook or whatever it might be, I'm putting my happiness in someone else's hands, and it's something external to me. Yeah. I can't control if they're going to like it or not. I might get 0 likes. And if that happens, like, or it's, you know, a lot less popular than I hoped it would be or whatever, I kind of say to myself, well, it was still better to do it than not do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then what can I learn from it, rather than like, oh God, that must have been absolutely shit. Yeah. It's like, okay, it didn't resonate with people in the same way. Is there something I could learn from it? Because I think the other danger for a lot of people is like, well, everyone else is wrong, my work is right, because it's their way of coping.
That's totally my idea. No, I'm not that.
But you know, like, I don't think it's about trying to turn your insecurity into arrogance.
Yeah. Because
that's a really easy one to go into, where it's like, instead of feeling bad about yourself, you go, oh, everyone else is wrong, blah, 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 I'm going to keep writing like this, you know, fuck you all kind of thing.
Yes.
No, it's like, okay, I still like that work. Other people didn't resonate with it. Does it matter? Did I do it for me? Did I do it for them?
Yeah.
By the way, it's always for you. That's the other thing as well. Again, when you're thinking about people who create content, for example, on social media, because they feel like they have to do it for their business, they're doing it for their audience, they're not doing it for themselves. And that's what plagues them as well. Because as soon as you make it all about how can I help that person, how can I make it resonate with them, it's so much pressure that you don't want to do it anymore, because it's like, I can't live up to that expectation.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm doing it for me, and I'm doing it because I'm curious about something and I want to learn about something, because most of the time when I write things, it's because I need to know it.
Yes.
I'm curious about the subject I'm writing about. I like researching. I just follow that curiosity and then something appears. And the reason why I think it's relatable is because I actually am going through it or have been through it.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't do things I'm going through because I think you have to have gone through it, usually.
I've started doing things I'm going through.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get back to that.
But I mean, it's something I've thought about, and I'm like, the reason why I've done it that way is just because I feel like I can offer better, tangible solutions to things if I've been through it. But it depends on what you're doing it for, right? Like, why are you doing it? I know why I'm doing it. You know why you're doing it. And that's another really important thing we could talk a whole thing about. But your reasons for doing things are really important.
Yeah. I only recently started doing the whole talking about it as I'm going through it. And I think technically you could argue that I've already been through it, because it was when I went through my bad spell of depression last year. And I thought, it's the concept for me of only ever sharing your highlight reel.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share everything.
Yeah.
And I felt a duty to share these things and to say, look, because I'd become quite arrogant. I'd had 6 years without any major incidents in my depression, and I'd become a little bit arrogant with it, and I think I actually needed last year to knock me down a peg or two.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And as a result, when I started talking about it, I was just like, because I'd begun to start saying, right, depression's completely beatable, fully, like, beatable, and that was where my arrogance was beginning to head. And that was, I'd literally envisioned situations where I was going to be up against people that were arguing the opposite point and about how complicated it is. And I actually then, through going through another depression last year, I came into sort of, it's always, I don't even want to call it the grey area anymore. I want to call it the rainbow. Like you got black and white, and then why do we have grey in the middle? Let's have the rainbow in the middle. Because it's a bright spectrum of colour. And for me, there was a point. When I was originally depressed, there was, oh my God, this is never going to end, there's nothing that can be done about it. Then when I started learning more techniques to it, I was like, oh, this is completely combatable, it's fixable, blah, 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 blah. And I've lived at both of those two extremes. And now I'm actually come onto the conclusion that there are things that can be done and that can take you to a better place. They're just sometimes bloody hard to do.
Yeah.
And as a result, it's like, yes, it's actually, the people who say there's nothing can be done are wrong. The people that say that it's completely fixable are also wrong.
Yeah.
It's a scale, it's a spectrum, it's like...
It's also like, okay, so you can change a lot of how you feel about things in your depression, definitely. We both know that, of course. But there is genetics at play as well.
Yeah.
So... yes, you can do a lot to influence how you feel, but there is still a part of you that you can't actually control.
Yeah.
And that's not to be defeatist, but it's just the reality. So if you're more susceptible to depression and have that kind of predisposition to it, then sure, you can do a lot of things to manage that, but it doesn't mean that you'll never be depressed again, because there's only so much of it that you can manage. Yeah. There is a part that you can't. And again, I don't think that's talked about enough. Because it sounds defeatist, but I don't mean it to be. It's just the reality of it.
The thing is, though, with that the things that will get you to 50% better on a good day will get you to 1% better on a bad day.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's still worth saying, right, what are the things that work for you?
Yeah.
Because it's this idea that 1% better is better than nothing.
Yes.
And this was the realization. Yeah, sure. When I knew these things towards in the last year, I still felt depressed, but I wasn't quite at the full extremes that I could. I did find myself heading for those extremes. But knowing these things actually still work, and the techniques I'd do them once when I'm feeling a little bit meh, and I'd be like, off we go again, like on full momentum. When I was feeling depressed, I'd have to do them 50 times before I'd even start to feel anything. But that was better than doing nothing. Yeah. And it's sort of similar to the whole doing the work. It's like doing a bit of the work even on a bad day, or even on when you don't feel like it, is still better than doing nothing.
Well, because emotion comes from motion, doesn't it? And it's like, but the thing is,
this is how I get depressed.
What I say to when I've worked with people is, it's all about the baby tiny steps. Like if it's really bad and you feel like you don't even want to get out of bed, like telling yourself you're going to run a marathon is just insane, you know? Whereas it's like, okay, today I got out of bed and I had a shower, and yesterday I didn't. That's an improvement.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, I'm going to count that as a win.
Yeah.
And you might not feel amazing after that, but you start counting all the little things you did, no matter how small they are. I went outside today. I went for a walk today. I actually went to the gym today. Oh, I ate better today. And suddenly you've got this like accumulative effect.
Yeah.
And I think keeping track of that, like, and this is why I'm a big fan of journaling, as you know.
Yeah.
And like keeping track of the little wins, you suddenly like, do you know, I'm doing a lot more than I thought I was doing. And now that I know I can do those smaller things because I've proven it to myself, what maybe slightly bigger thing could I do? What maybe slightly, you know, interests me? What, coming back to curiosity, what am I curious about? What am I even slightly interested in? Because I think one of the worst pieces of advice is like to follow your passion. Mm-hmm. Some people just don't have that burning desire immediately. Mm-hmm. Some people are born with it and they're like, I know I love this thing.
Yeah.
But most people don't. Most people don't have a burning desire, and if they did, it got like beaten the crap out of them when they were younger, so they forgot all about it and suppressed it. Mm-hmm. But if you just say to people like, just what are you remotely interested in? Like, oh, I quite like cooking. Okay, well maybe just kind of make the commitment that you're going to cook 3 times this week, because if they're not cooked at all, like that might be quite a lot.
Yeah. And
then just maybe buy a recipe book, and then suddenly it's like it grows into a passion.
Yeah.
But trying to find your passion is so much pressure. Like it's huge, and yeah, it's the thing that people think is so inspiring, and I hate it. Like, follow your passion. Like, shut up. That doesn't help people.
One question you ask yourself though, which might work for a whole bunch of people. Nothing ever works for everyone.
Of course.
But one thing that might work for a whole bunch of people is that you said, well, what was I passionate about when I was a kid? And as you said, what might have got beaten out of you, what might have like you just forgotten about or pushed to one side.
Yeah.
I started playing the piano when I was 6. You know, music was in me from that age. It's like, so really now it's like, what could I do? Well, I could probably get my guitar out, or probably go and have a go on my drum kit or something. You know, it's like but I don't really scratch that itch anymore. But creativity is an overall blanket. You know, I make videos, I write, that's about it.
But sorry, I just have to pick up on that because that was just brilliant. You don't scratch that itch anymore, but that's exactly it. Like, people feel that itch and they're like, they want to scratch it, but they're too afraid and they don't do it. And I think it's so important because okay, let's like put it into context. So let's say, for example, you wanted to play the drums. And you're like, oh, I kind of want to do it, but I'm probably never going to be a drummer, so best not really do it. What's the point in doing it? I'm never going to do it successfully, so what's the point? And then the what if is always kind of there though, and it like you can suppress it for a while. You're like, no, I'm not going to do it, but then it rears its head again. Mm-hmm. And I think just scratching that itch and then realizing, oh, it's not for me, is worth doing it, even if it doesn't amount to anything. Like I did it with dancing. Yeah. So I was really interested in dancing. And then I was like, this was actually at university when I was with my partner and stuff. And then I was like, right, that's the thing I'm going to try out. And then I was like, I'm going to be a successful dancer, blah, 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 blah. And it turned out that like I just fell in love with the process of going after something, not the dancing itself. Like I like it and I still do it to an extent, but I scratched that itch and it was so worth it, even though it never went anywhere. It taught me that I had discipline. It taught me that I could go after something that I was really bad at. It taught me all these things, even though it never amounted to anything. And I think people feel like they need a sure thing, like it's going to result in something in order to convince themselves to do it. But I absolutely argue the opposite. Like, do it anyway, even if it's going to fail. Yeah. Like, the question's always, what could you do? What would you do if you couldn't fail? It's the wrong question. What would you do even if you could? Yeah. Because just scratch the itch. Like, and that's it.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, there's a lot of research that says that actually, you know, people, the idea of someone going all in on one thing, it'll work for some, but on other people, actually goal hopping is a good thing. Because we don't, none of us really want the destination. We want the growth that comes with it. And when we're growing, when we're actually developing, we're happy. Now, when do you grow the most? When you know, in that sort of bell curve thing, it's like you start growing and with like this, with like, it's really bad because it's going to be on audio, but it goes up a lot.
Imagine a bell, people.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. You start well, it's more of a plateau, really. Your growth sort of diminishes after a while, and it becomes so much harder to get to the next plateau. Like when when I learned to play the guitar, there was a point where I got so better and better and better, and I still remember, like, I started off being able to play "Don't Look Back in Anger" and couldn't play the F chord because I had to bar the whole thing, and then, like, a year later, I could play, like, the fingerpick style of a Street Spirit by Radiohead, and I was like, that was a big achievement for me. But then, to get to the next level just became harder and harder and harder. And it's like, some people will be totally driven to push through that plateau and go for it. Other people actually might want to then go and take up something completely different and get that growth, those easy wins. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, and again, that's something that gets beaten out of people because, like, oh, well, you're always chopping and changing. It's like,
so true.
What does it matter to you if I change my goals? What if I change and want to go and do a different sport, or I want to go? I know I'm doing Olympic weightlifting at the moment. I'm already thinking that there'll be another sport, like, in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's absolutely okay to have many interests.
Yeah, I'm not an Olympic weightlifter or a CrossFitter or a guitarist or a musician or even whatever. I'm a human, and that can be any damn thing it wants to be. It's like, when I moved from being a PT, well, I'm still a PT, but when I started doing the mindset coach, it's like, well, are you some sort of psychologist? It's like, no, I'm just interested in human development, and I will do that in any way I see fit. It's like, the name of this podcast, Your Progress is Our Passion. Like, progress in any area.
Yeah.
It's not just your fitness is our passion.
I.e., one of your biggest values is growth.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, same.
Like, and I do like the milestones. Like, honestly, like with I'm a big Xbox player, and I love it when an achievement comes up. Like, I think you got a PlayStation. It's trophies on that. But on an Xbox, it's like, okay, here's the storyline of the game, and then you press the little home button, and it goes, okay, here's the achievements of the game. It's like, do this 600 times. Kill an enemy with every single weapon. I'm like, I'm doing all that because a little trophy will pop up at the bottom of the screen and tell me that I've done well. And yeah, my Xbox loves me, obviously. It gives me that little pat on the back. Right, let's see how we're doing for time, because I know you've got to get to work. Pants, it's 25 to. So I'll quick fire questions. Three, they might not be quick fire. Okay. They're usually not, these ones. What's the worst piece of advice you see people getting given too much?
Follow your passion.
Okay.
Terrible. Follow your curiosity, not your passion. Because passion comes later. Passion isn't usually there on day one. And I think that's the biggest one. There's loads of things. Be fearless as well. It's a bad one.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think is a good piece of advice people aren't hearing enough, or at least not taking enough?
Follow your curiosity.
That was a very self-serving answer, wasn't it? What's the second biggest piece of advice? Good advice. You think people aren't hearing enough?
They're not hearing enough. Do you know what? I'm going to stick with that because I think that's my biggest thing.
Okay.
Don't get it right, get it written.
I respect you for sticking to it.
Yeah, because I do think that's a huge one.
And finally, this is going to be a repetitive question on the podcast, and you're the first person to get asked it, because the idea I'm trying to get is a pre-approved list of guests for this podcast. Here is someone you think I should interview.
I'm going to give you a really annoying answer.
That's going to be someone I can't get hold of, isn't it?
Nope, it's going to be nobody, and the reason why is because I think obviously there are a lot of people you can meet, but I think that as soon as you think you need to meet someone, you put them on a bit of a pedestal. Okay. And I think that that's dangerous. Idolising people, admiring people's fine.
Okay, who's someone I should meet then? Not need to. It would be nice to meet. It's not a to-do list, it's a could-do list.
I'm still sticking with my answer. I think, because I've always had that thing where when I've met somebody that I really wanted to meet, in the nicest way possible, I've been disappointed because I ended up putting them on, a pedestal thinking that they were going to be this amazing person, which they are. Yeah. But you end up meeting them and you're like, oh, it's not really what my expectations, it went through the roof. And then it was like, oh, and then I disappointed myself. So I'm really sorry to annoy you with that.
Okay,
but
it's fine.
But I just think that's an important thing for people to realise as well.
Where can everyone listening find you on social media?
Facebook's definitely my favourite kind of platform. But I also use Instagram and I use Medium as well. So On Instagram, it's Sarah C. And
which is CEE.
CEE, yes.
Like Gary V. He's got 2 silent E's after his name. You've got 2 silent E's after yours.
Yes, absolutely.
It's actually, on Instagram, it's _Sarah _CEE _.
It is, well remembered.
Which is dead easy to find.
It is. And Facebook, it's Sarah C. Writer. It's sarah.c.writer. So
Okay.
that's where you'd find me there. I use just my profile at the moment, so you feel free to add me as a friend. And I will be at some point, spoiler alert, creating my own group. So that is to be coming. That'll all be announced later.
Awesome. Well, this is going out in exactly 4 weeks.
So it may exist by then.
It is Wednesday, right? Yeah.
It is
It's going out
Wednesday.
4 weeks today.
Awesome.
It's the first time I've known, whilst in front of the person I'm interviewing, when their interview's going up. I was like, it'll be going up like December-ish.
Yeah.
Right. Cool.
Cool. Thank you so much for that.
Right, well, thanks to Sarah for that interview today. So much stuff in there that honestly, like I said, there was 4 things in the first time, and the 4th one I didn't come back to was that you're not alone. If you know, I think one of the points I want to touch on that when Sarah said about writing for yourself. We have this idea of, especially with business, that you should be writing for a particular avatar. It's what does this person look like? Who is this person? And then you end up writing what that person would like to hear. That avatar is perfectly okay being you. And if you want to write to what you would experience or what you understand, that's awesome. Because quite frankly, one of the reasons I started the mental health circuit I do is because I realised that there are people just like me suffering the same things. And so what is relevant to me, if I was writing for myself, will be relevant to a big, massive group of people, because we're just not alone. So that was like a Jerry Springer-esque final thought. I'm going to leave it there. It's the end of February. I hope by the time you're listening to this, is there anything I want to plug? Not sure. Go and check out Sarah _C_ Just put all the underscores in there. And when I do the 1 minute clip on this, which will be up probably the same day that we're doing this, I will tag her on the Instagram feed as well. Thanks for watching / listening, however you consume this. As always, your progress is our passion, and I will see you next week.